Shutdowns happen when Congress cannot compromise on a fixed budget for the upcoming year, and as a result, non-essential employees and operations stop working until the issue is resolved. The 2019 government shutdown started when President Trump refused to sign the Senate's short-term spending bill because it lacked funding for a border wall. Neither Congress or the President were willing to compromise, and as a result, the government was forced into a partial shutdown. During the shutdown, Trump tweeted, "We need the wall for the safety and the security of our country. If there is no wall, then there is no deal." Despite his assurances of success, the president backed down and signed the funding bill, ending the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Furthermore, he also declared a national emergency in another attempt to receive funding for the wall. After conducting extensive research of the issue, I, like many others, have come to the conclusion that using a shutdown as political leverage is an unsound strategy because the harm caused far outweighs any potential benefits. There are three distinct reasons why using a shutdown as political leverage does not work. The first is that the economic damage caused is too extensive. The second is that it's bad for public perception. And the third is that it doesn't produce the intended results. First up on the list, the damages. One of the groups that felt the economic impact was federal employees. During the shutdown, over 800,000 people were furloughed. The shutdown, according to an article in the New York Times, federal employees have each missed 2 paychecks, which adds up to over $5,000 in wages, which translates roughly into $2 million per workday. During this time, employees were forced to look for additional employment. Also, employees had to increase their use of credit. Although federal employees will eventually receive compensation, the shutdown has undoubtedly caused long-term consequences, such as a decrease in morale. To quote Brian Naylor, a National Desk respondent, "There are untold moral problems coming from this that we'll see play out, I think, over the next few days, weeks, and probably even years." Some of you are thinking shutdowns are common, and that federal employees were prepared. In most cases, that would be true. However, due to the extensive length of the shutdown, even the most prepared would have struggled financially. Another group that was affected was government contractors. According to The National, 4 out of every 10 people who work for the federal government are private contractors. Government contractors were hit in 2 ways financially. The first is that the government was committed to pay $89.3 billion to contractors, or an average of $245 million per day. Government contractors, unlike federal employees, however, do not receive compensation for lost income, meaning that they will never receive these funds. The second way contractors were affected was that due to the shutdown, military and high-tech contractors' products were unable to hit the market, which caused a substantial loss of income. Another group that was adversely affected was small businesses across America. During the shutdown, businesses were unable to get loans from either the Small Business Administration or the United States Department of Agriculture. Businesses were also unable to hire new employees during the shutdown. Small businesses during this time could also not receive much-needed tax returns, but most significantly, there was a massive decrease in consumer spending due to the federal employees' loss of income. Furthermore, this decrease is expected to continue long after the shutdown has ended. The final major group to be affected was the federal government itself. During the shutdown, due to the lack of physical manpower and funding, many of the functions within the federal government became capped at the knee. One of the departments that was the most impacted by the shutdown was the Federal Bureau of Investigation, otherwise known as the FBI. For instance, the FBI's counterterrorism unit was unable to pay criminal informants due to the lack of funding, which resulted in a loss of trust between the FBI and criminal informants. It also resulted in the FBI losing criminal informants because of the inability to compensate them. Another FBI division that was affected was the anti-drug trafficking units. For instance, a task force targeting interstate meth and heroin traffickers has run out of the funds to pay for controlled purchases. Another example, agents working a multi-year MS-13 investigation have resorted to conference calls to communicate with Spanish-speaking sources. Another reason using a shutdown as political leverage is an unsound strategy is the fact that it is bad for public perception. Shutdowns are bad for public perception for 3 reasons. The first is that the damage inflicted caused a decrease in faith in the Trump administration. The second is that using a shutdown for political agendas is highly disliked by the American public. And the third reason is using a shutdown to force such a highly and controversial and polarized issue causes increased tensions between the President and Congress. To give you a visual of the previous slide, here are some physical statistics. According to a PBS poll, 7 out of 10 Americans believe that using the shutdown as a means of furthering political agendas is a terrible strategy. Secondly, according to a Pew Research Center study, 58% of Americans oppose expanding the wall. The statistics tell us is that not only was initiating a shutdown unpopular, but the very purpose of it was not supported by a majority of the American public. The final reason why using a shutdown is an unsound strategy is because it does not produce the intended results. The aim of the shutdown was to increase border wall funding, however the 2019 shutdown failed to do so. Furthermore, in order to attempt to get the necessary funding, Trump declared a national emergency, which is highly unlikely to receive any additional funding due to the political and legal backlash it is likely to cause. Therefore, Trump's promise of funding for the wall is very unlikely to occur. Conclusion, a shutdown is an unsound strategy because it causes extensive financial strain, because it's bad for public perception, and finally because shutdowns don't achieve their purpose. The purpose of this video is to make those like you and me who vote for elections aware of the consequences of shutdowns. As voters, we have the power to stop a politician from implementing another shutdown of this magnitude, and in doing so protect our fellow Americans from the immense economic strains that ensue.